What you're about to hear is probably not what most people are saying right now about the housing market. If you've been paying attention at all, you've heard a lot of confident opinions. Some people are convinced the market is about to take off again. Others are convinced it's about to fall apart. Rates are dropping, rates are staying high, prices are going to surge, prices are going to crash. And depending on who you're listening to, the story changes literally every week. Here's the problem. Most of that noise isn't actually helpful if you're trying to make a real decision, especially here in Charlotte. So in this video, I want to slow things down, strip away the hype, the fear, and the oversimplified advice, and talk about what actually matters as we head into 2026. Most importantly, what doesn't. And not as a commentator, not as someone chasing headlines, but as someone who lives here, works here, and helps people make serious real estate decisions in this market every single day. Now, if you're buying, selling, or relocating, or even just deciding whether a move makes sense in the next 6 months or the next couple of years, my goal here isn't to push you in any direction. It's to help you think clearly, because clarity beats urgency every single time. The first thing you need to understand is this. The Charlotte market today is not the same market it was a few years ago, but it's also not broken. What changed isn't that people stopped wanting to live here. What changed is that new decisions are being made now. Buyers are more cautious, sellers are more sensitive to price, and everyone is paying closer attention to the monthly payments, long-term value, and trade-offs. That's not fear, that's maturity. That's what a market looks like when people are no longer making emotional decisions under artificial pressure. Charlotte is still growing, jobs are still coming here. People are relocating here for work, lifestyle, family, and opportunity. That hasn't stopped. What has stopped is the idea that every home will sell itself no matter how it's priced, prepared, or presented. And honestly, that's healthier. It may feel uncomfortable if you got used to things being easy, but it's a more honest market. One of the biggest problems I see right now is that people are obsessing over the wrong things. They're focusing on variables they can't control and ignoring the ones that actually drive outcomes. The first thing people are over-obsessing about is trying to perfectly time the market, waiting for the absolute bottom if they're buying or the top if they're selling. Listen, I understand the instinct. Nobody wants to feel like they made a mistake. Nobody wants to look back and think, if I just waited a little longer. But in real life, perfect timing is something people talk about far more often than they actually achieve. Most people who try to perfectly time the market end up doing nothing, and nothing is still a decision. It's still cost, even if it doesn't feel like it has a cost in the moment. Time has cost. Opportunity has a cost. Lifestyle trade-offs have a cost. And a lot of people fear waking up and having that uncertainty treat them as if in a way that thoughtful certainty never would have. It's the peaks and the valleys. People are making good decisions in this market. They're doing it because their finances and their time horizon are first. They accept the trade-offs instead of waiting for certainty that never really shows up. The second thing people are obsessing about is waiting for the perfect interest rate. Listen, rates matter. I'm not minimizing that. Monthly payments matter, affordability matters, but rates are not the only lever in a real estate decision, and often they're not even the most important one. Price matters, negotiation, concessions, location matters, inventory, quality, time horizon, these things all matter. I've watched people wait so long for a slightly better rate that they gave up far more in price, opportunity, and flexibility than the rate itself ever would have cost them. And by the time they finally acted, they were competing again, or worse, settling for something that didn't really fit their life. Rates move, they always do, but you can't refinance time and you can't rewind missed opportunities that would have made sense for you at that time. The third thing people get wrong, especially in Charlotte, is assumption that this is one single market. It is absolutely not. Charlotte is a collection of micro markets, different neighborhoods, different price points, different buyer pools, motivations, inventory types, all the above. What's happening in one part of the city can be completely different from what's happening 3 miles away. What's true at one price range can be totally wrong at another. Entry-level homes behave differently than move-up homes. Move-up homes behave differently than luxury homes. Townhomes behave differently than single-family homes. You get the picture. New construction behaves differently than resale. That's why generic advice breaks down so fast here. You can't make good decisions in Charlotte using national headlines or broad assumptions. You have to understand the local context and how it applies to your specific situation. Now, if you're thinking about buying in Charlotte going into 2026, there are a few things that matter far more than most people realize. The first is clarity on why you're buying. Not what, but why. Is this a long-term home, a short-term move, a lifestyle upgrade, a school decision, a commute decision, a financial strategy, a combination of all the above? That why determines everything else. It determines which compromises are acceptable and which ones are not. It determines whether waiting helps you or hurts you. It determines whether you should prioritize price, location, condition, or timing. Without clarity on why you're buying, it's almost impossible to make a confident decision. That's how people end up second guessing themselves, or even worse, just feeling stuck. Now, the second thing that matters is inventory quality, not inventory quantity. Yes, there are more listings than there ever were during the frenzy years, but more listings doesn't automatically mean better options. Some homes are priced correctly, prepared well, and move quickly. Others sit because they're anchored to expectations that are no longer matching buyer behavior. Knowing the difference between those two categories is critical. Buying the wrong home at the wrong price in a more cautious market is far more damaging than buying a home in a market that's moving sideways. Quality matters more now than it did when everything sold instantly. The third thing that matters, negotiation leverage is back, but it's selective. You can't assume every seller is desperate, but you also don't have to waive common sense anymore. Thank God. The wins are now understanding where flexibility exists, identifying motivation, and structuring smart offers instead of purely aggressive ones. Aggression used to work because there were 10 buyers behind you ready to overpay. That's no longer universally true. Strategy matters again. Smart buyers today are patient, informed, and realistic. They know when to push and they know when not to. They know when the home is unique and when it has plenty of substitutes. They know that winning isn't about beating a seller. It's about buying a home they just won't regret. Now let's talk to sellers for a moment, because this is where I see the most expensive mistakes happening right now. The biggest mistake I see sellers making is pricing for the market they wish existed instead of the one that actually exists. Buyers today are informed. They compare everything. They notice condition, layout, updates, and value immediately. You don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore. The market is not punishing sellers, it's rewarding realism. Homes that are priced correctly, prepared properly, and marketed intentionally still sell well. Homes that aren't just don't. This isn't about underpricing, it's about alignment. When price, presentation, and expectations line up, the market will respond. When they don't, the home sits, and sitting is not neutral. Sitting creates a story in the buyer's mind, and that story is rarely favorable. I also see sellers just underestimate how emotional buyers still are, even in a more rational market. Buyers are cautious, but they're not cold. They still want to feel good about what they're buying. They still want to feel like they're making a smart move. Homes that feel cared for and thoughtfully presented stand out far more now than they did when the demand was overpowering everything else. Let me explain how I personally think about decisions in this market, because this framework helps cut through a lot of the noise. I don't ask whether now is a good or bad time. I ask whether the move makes sense for my life, whether it makes sense financially over time, and whether I clearly understand my options and trade-offs. When those answers are yes, timing becomes a little less scary. The people who struggle are the ones waiting for certainty before they move. Real estate rarely offers certainty. It offers choices, it offers trade-offs. The key is understanding those trade-offs clearly instead of pretending they don't exist. That's true whether you're buying your first home, moving up, downsizing, or relocating to Charlotte from somewhere else. The market doesn't need to be perfect for a decision to be good. It just needs to be understood. If you're a buyer, here's how I would think about the next, say, 30 to 180 days. First, define your non-negotiables. Not what looks good on paper, but what actually affects your day-to-day life. Commute, schools, walkability, yard space, noise, budget, comfort. Your real monthly number, not the optimistic one. Most buyers get into trouble because they start shopping without defining their actual priorities. They fall in love with a house that doesn't really fit their life, and the whole decision becomes emotional. That's how regret starts. Second, build a short list of neighborhoods based on how you live, not what's popular online. There is no best area in Charlotte. There's only best fit. A young professional who wants walkability in restaurants will experience Charlotte very differently than someone who wants yard space in schools. Someone who works uptown has different constraints than someone who works remotely. Someone relocating from a dense city has different expectations than someone coming from a rural area. This is also where I see relocation buyers making one of the most common mistakes. They choose a town name and assume the whole area feels the same. Fort Mill, Indian Land, Huntersville, Waxhaw. These areas have pockets that feel completely different within the same zip code. That's why on this channel, I'm going to talk honestly about who areas are for and who they're not for. Because the fastest way to trust someone is when they're willing to say this is not a fit for you. Third, understand leverage by reading the listing, not guessing. How long has it been on the market? Has it had a price reduction? What's the condition? Is it unique or easily substituted? Is it priced to invite activity, or are they just testing the market? In a market where days on market are longer and buyers are more selective, you can negotiate, but you need to be smart. And smart is not always aggressive. Smart is reading the room. Fourth, offers that protect you without insulting the seller. This is a big one. It sounds simple, but it's really rare. The best offers right now are structured offers, reasonably priced, clear terms, strong financing, a timeline that helps the seller, concessions that make sense, and a tone that feels kind of professional and not combative. The goal isn't just to win an argument. The goal is to buy a home you'll feel good about owning. Fifth, inspection mindset matters now more than ever. Every resale home has issues. That's normal. The question is not whether issues exist. The question is whether they're manageable and priced correctly. Cosmetic issues, maintenance items, structural problems are not the same thing, but knowing the difference saves buyers from unnecessary panic and sellers from unnecessary concessions. Now, if you're a seller going into 2026, here's how I would think about it. First, accept the reality of the market you're in. That's not a negative statement, it's a power statement. A market that requires strategy is a market where professionals create real value. Second, price with intent. Pricing is not about what you need. Pricing is not about what your neighbor got 2 or 3 years ago. Pricing is about what a buyer can justify today against their alternatives. In a market where buyers are comparing everything, pricing high and hoping to negotiate is usually the slowest and most expensive path you can take. The best sellers right now are creating urgency early. Sometimes that means pricing slightly under where you think it should land. Sometimes it means pricing exactly on the money with a home that shows exceptionally well. Just depends on the property and the circumstances. What doesn't work is pricing high and waiting for the market to educate you. Third, preparation matters more now than it did during the frenzy. You don't need the remodel, but you do need to remove distractions. Declutter, clean, brighten, fix obvious items. Make the home feel cared for. In a market where buyers are cautious, they're looking for reasons to say no. Preparation removes those reasons to say no. Fourth, marketing matters again. In 2021, you could take average photos with a cell phone and still sell. Not because the marketing was good, but because the demand was just overpowering. In a more rational market, marketing helps buyers feel confident. Photography, video, showing access, digital distribution, and agent communication all matter again. Not because it's flashy, but because it reduces uncertainty. Fifth, have a plan if the market gives you feedback. If your home's been on the market longer than the average for your segment, you need a plan. Don't panic. You just need a plan. That plan might be a price adjustment, or it might be a concession strategy. It might be changing how the home is presented. But you need an objective way to read signals and act instead of waiting and hoping for things to change. Let me talk to relocators for a moment, because Charlotte is one of the most common relocation markets I work with. And relocation brings a set of its own challenges. You're not just buying a house, you're choosing a lifestyle before you've lived it. Here's the framework I want you to use. First, define your daily rhythm. What do you want a normal Tuesday to feel like? Commute length, walkability, noise level, proximity to things you actually use. Second, define the trade-off you can live with. Charlotte decisions almost always involve trade-offs. You can't usually maximize price, commute, schools, and lifestyle all at once. Pick the two that matter the most and accept the trade-offs in the others. Third, tour areas, not just houses. Houses can be changed, locations can't. That's why This channel is going to focus heavily on neighborhoods and areas, not just listings, because choosing where you live matters more than choosing a floor plan. Now, let me bring this back to the bigger picture. Going into 2026, Charlotte looks like a market that's stabilizing, not collapsing. Prices have been relatively steady. Days on market are longer. Buyers are more selective. Sellers need to be a little more strategic. Again, that's not a crisis. That's a market that requires thought. You can win as a buyer. You can win as a seller, but you have to stop letting noise make decisions for you. So here's what I want you to do after this video. If you're a buyer, write down your non-negotiables and your real monthly comfort number, then start learning the micro markets, because in Charlotte, micro markets decide outcomes. If you're a seller, look at your home through a buyer's eyes, not your own. Decide whether you want the best value to be in your lane while the buyers choose alternatives. If you're relocating, stop trying to pick the best place and start trying to pick the best fit for your actual life. And finally, let me tell you what this channel is going to be. Every week, I'm going to put out one long form video just like this: calm, clear, local, no hype. Sometimes it'll be market intelligence. Sometimes it'll be neighborhood deep dives. Sometimes it'll be buyer or seller reality checks. Sometimes it'll be direct comparisons. The goal here is always the same: to help you make better decisions with more confidence. Now, if this video helped you think a little clearer, you're in the right place. And if you want a direct conversation, feel free to reach out to me anytime.